When you're building your application with Cloud Client Libraries, one of the first things that you'll need to do is authenticate with application default credentials. In a previous video, I mentioned that you could do that with a simple Gcloud command that initiates a webflow to sign in with your Google account. But what happens after that? Let's see what's what with client libraries and application default credentials. In order for any Cloud Client Libraries in your code to access your Google Cloud project and resources, they need to know how to authenticate. Cloud Client Libraries look in the environment that they're running in for that information. When your code is running on one of Google Cloud services, for example, Cloud Run or Compute Engine, it would normally use a service account associated with that resource. But if you're developing in a local environment like your laptop, you have to provide those credentials yourself. Now, there are two Gcloud commands that let you do that. The first is Gcloud auth login, but it has to have the update ADC flag. Without that flag, this command will have no effect on your application default credentials. Instead, it authorizes access for other Gcloud CLI commands used to manage your cloud resources from your terminal. The second and preferred command for getting application default credentials is Gcloud auth application default login. Now, both Gcloud commands will have you log in through a web browser, and then it'll write credentials to a well-known location, depending on your operating system. Here's what that credentials file will look like once you've authenticated. You'll see a line that references a quota project. That's another important factor to consider when using Cloud Client Libraries. When it's not set, you might see some warnings or error messages about it. The quota project is a Google Cloud project that's used to track and enforce quotas for any resources consumed by any API calls your code will make. By default, at the time that you generate application default credentials, the quota project will be set to the project ID in your Gcloud config that you can retrieve with the command gcloud config get project. If that value is not set when you retrieve application default credentials, or if you need to specify a different project, you can update the value with the command gcloud auth application default set quota project, followed by the project that you want to use. The client libraries you use in your application code will know what file path to look in for your credentials. If for whatever reason you need to specify a different location for them, you can do that by setting the environment variable Google application credentials to the path of your credentials file. If this environment variable is set, then client libraries will automatically prefer this file over the default location. This method of specifying a credentials file also works for generated service account keys, but using service account keys creates a security risk, so we don't recommend using them. But what if you need to use a service account instead of your own credentials? Now, that's possible, especially if you're working within an organization or a project where your permissions are limited and access is delegated through service accounts. In that case, you can still steer clear of service account keys by using service account impersonation. In short, service account impersonation allows you to impersonate a service account, essentially letting you perform operations on Google Cloud resources with that service account's identity, including its permissions and access. For this to work, your user account will need the service account token creator role assigned to it on either the service account IAM policy or the entire project IAM policy. I made a whole separate video with more on service account impersonation that I'll link in the description. To generate application default credentials for a service account, it's the same command as before, Gcloud auth application default login, but this time you'll need to add the impersonate service account flag along with the service account email. Like before, the command will kick off a webflow for you to sign in with your account, and then it'll generate a credentials file by the same name with different contents that your application code will use to access Google Cloud resources as a service account. To demonstrate, here's what happens when I try to access BigQuery from my Python application using my own credentials that don't have any access to BigQuery. This time, I'll refresh my application default credentials using a service account that I have service account token creator role for. Once I've authenticated, there's nothing I need to update in my code. I'll just rerun it, and it works. So that's application default credentials. It's a powerful way of authenticating because of how simple it is. A single command gives your application access to Google Cloud without having to juggle secret keys or sensitive files. And when your credentials expire, refreshing them is just a matter of requesting them again. Now, did I miss anything? If you have any questions about application default credentials or Cloud Client Libraries, feel free to drop them in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.